what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Friday, April 7th, 2017, and all I can say is, Je suis Syrian, and welcome to the Trumpocalypse, because things are going to heck in a handcart right now. As you are probably aware, last night, the U.S. bombed a Syrian airfield, cruise missile attack, on the 100-year anniversary of the entry into World War I. 100 years ago yesterday, the U.S. declared war against Germany in World War I, which is kind of weird because the war actually started between Austria, Hungary, and Serbia. But you know how these things sort of mutate here. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today, obviously. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. The Lady Claire will be with us in hour number 3, and Mike is in our control room ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And the hackers have been just pounding on my server all morning long. They are trying to find some way to shout down the outrage and anger of everybody over this incredible war crime that has taken place right before our eyes. Now, the U.S. government was claiming they fired 59 cruise missiles at this air base in Syria, from which they claim the mission that dropped the chemical weapons in Idlib was launched. It's also the air base that shot down the Israeli plane when Israel was bombing Syria a little while ago. And they're claiming the air base is almost completely destroyed. And actually, as usual, they're exaggerating what's going on. Apparently, 9 people were killed. I'm sorry, 6 people were killed, some of them Russian, and that's going to complicate things. And 9 aircraft were destroyed, 6 of them 1960s era MiG-23s. So it is not really a spectacular victory, and here's where it gets interesting. 37 of the 59 cruise missiles missed entirely. Nobody knows where they went. Even the short-range Block 3 Tomahawk cruise missiles could fly all the way across Syria into Iraq, even into Iran. So it's a mess over there. I mean, huge attack, not all that successful, and just complicating the situation in the Mideast to no end. And by the way, the main runway apparently is still unscathed at that airbase. They missed that too. Looking at the bomb damage assessment images after the attack, most of the craters are actually on the outskirts of the base. They weren't very accurate. Either the Tomahawk cruise missiles are built to the same high standards of quality as the F-22 and the F-35, or Syria and Russia are able to jam and misdirect them, either one of which should be a warning to the United States. Now, the Russian Ministry of Defense is saying this cruise missile attack had to be prepared a long time ago. It didn't just happen in the days since this false flag chemical weapons attack in Idlib. And we're talking about a greater than 50% failure rate on those Tomahawks, for whatever reason. Badly built, outdated, successfully jammed, interfered with. And everybody is basically outraged at the United States government for this, and so am I. I have never been as disgusted with and ashamed of the United States government as I am this very day. Article coming out of FortRuss.com, World on Brink of Global Conflict. This thing is easily going to spiral out of control. And, of course, the war profiteers are banging their hands together. The central bankers are looking forward to all that rich harvest of debt from the war, because that's what war is. It's a giant machine into which they drop human beings, and out the bottom comes money. That's what they want to do this whole thing for. Another little article of concern, this is from Financial Times. Syria strikes seen as both warning and incentive for North Korea. Analysts are saying that what the U.S. just did in Syria will encourage Pyongyang to accelerate their nuclear program. No kidding. Of course it will. After this harebrained and not to mention ineffectual attack on Syria, every world leader will be rushing to acquire nuclear weapons out of a fully justified fear that the U.S. government will attack them at any moment under some flimsy pretext. The United States government has shown itself to be recklessly aggressive. And if this does spin out of control, if it escalates, other nuclear-armed nations are going to be more willing to push that nuclear button out of a quite reasonable fear. The U.S. will just strike first with nuclear weapons. Because after all, the United States is the only nation to ever actually use nuclear weapons against the civilians of another country. Now, Putin, needless to say, is outraged about this. He's saying that the U.S. attack on Syria violates international law. He is absolutely correct on that. The United States is not welcome in Syria. They do not have the permission of the Syrian government to be in there. They've been trying to get rid of Assad for going on 6 years. They tried that whole thing about Assad gassing his own people in 2013, 2014. That didn't work. So then they turned around and said, well, we're actually bombing Syria to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda. That didn't work, so now they're back to, we have to get Assad. And everybody sees what's going on. This is a violation of international law. The United States government is trying to take the position that they have a right to go in and blow up Syria because the Syrian government is using chemical weapons on their own people. Remember what happened down in Waco? The U.S. government gassed a church full of women and children to death with a banned chemical weapon. And under the U.S. government's logic, that gives every other nation on earth the right to militarily intervene in the United States of America. That's how ridiculous this thing is. Now, Rand Paul has correctly pointed out, Trump has violated the Constitution by ordering an attack on Syria without a congressional measure. Remember, under the Constitution, only Congress can declare war against another country. Now, the War Powers Act does allow the President to deploy U.S. forces to deal with an immediate threat to the United States without Congress for a limited period of time, but that doesn't apply here. No Americans were killed in that supposed gas attack. No sovereign U.S. territory has been invaded or damaged by Syria. The War Powers Act does not apply. Now, ISIS is very grateful, because under the cover of the U.S. missile strike, they counterattacked near Palmyra, and they've gained ground. The U.S. is now helping ISIS in their fight against Assad. None of this makes any sense, if you really think about it. Now, Syria's government has deployed a special ISIS hunter unit to Palmyra because they can see where this is going to be going. I know the phone lines are really, really filled up, but I want to get through this serious stuff, and then I'll start taking phone calls here. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is over there in Russia saying it's time for you to rethink your support for the Syrian government. He's not getting any traction at all because Russia knows that gas attack story was a big steaming pile of USDA choice bovine excrement. They're not buying it. They're not going to go along to be polite. Putin is furious. He's saying this is an illegal act of aggression, and he's already called off the agreement where the U.S. and Russia would communicate with each other to avoid any kind of clashes between U.S. and Russian troops. So now the possibility is open. If the U.S. invades Syria again, that they're going to come up against Russian forces. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who just now rejoined our network. And we're talking about the Russian reaction. Tillerson's over there saying, you've got to stop supporting Syria and let us go on in and take over the place. And Russia's not going to do it. I'll tell you that right now. Russia's going to draw the line in the sand right along that Syrian border with the Mediterranean. Russia's already out there saying the U.S. airstrikes in Syria came within an inch of a military clash with Russian forces. And as I said a little bit earlier, we're now finding out, yes, some Russians were killed in this strike on the airbase. Russia has already pledged to increase the effectiveness of Syrian air defenses, going to be sending them more anti-aircraft, anti-cruise missiles, radar systems, all of that. They're going to start pouring it on in there, and I would not be surprised if Russia replaces those 9 airplanes, probably with something a little bit more modern than the MiG-23. And the Russian warship, the Admiral Grigorovich, which is one of their main battleships, is now in Syria. They were ordered out of the Black Sea following the airstrike on the base. They've now docked in Syria. And they are a very, very potent defensive platform. Now, here's an interesting story. And before I get into it, first of all, it was coming out of Tel Aviv. And the story originates with MEMRI, the Middle East Media Research Institute, which is a known Israeli propaganda front. What they do is they go to the Arab media and provide free English translations to the Western media, but the translations are always skewed and biased to favor Israel and make the Arab nations look bad. Remember when they were all screaming about how Ahmadinejad said he was going to wipe Israel off the face of the earth? And language experts said that wasn't what he said. He said that Israel will eventually vanish from the pages of history, which is very, very passive. MEMRI are the ones who took that statement and said, Assad says he's going to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Now, if any of Trump's advisors were telling him that the American people were going to be on board with this thing, he is finding out now today that he's got a public relations nightmare on his hands. Some of his most influential supporters from last year are now slamming him for having broken this promise about no more foreign interventions. Nigel Farage took him to task. Just up one side and down the other. And is saying that voters are going to turn against Donald Trump. And yes, that's already going to start happening here. And he says, all of these interventions in the Middle East, they're always making things worse, never better. The only people who benefit from all this death and carnage and grief are oil companies, weapons makers, Israel, and the private central banks. Marine Le Pen, who was buddy-buddy with Donald Trump, is out there just savaging him, saying the U.S. is trying to be policeman to the world. And again, this whole story about the gas attack was another obvious false flag. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, Hawaii's own representative, is out there saying the strike was reckless and short-sighted and can lead to nuclear war. Yes, it can. And because Gabbard is also a resident of Oahu, she understands that we're a target. All the communications for the Pacific Fleet go right through here in Pearl Harbor. We don't have a lot of ships. Most of the military assets are forward-based in places like Guam and Japan. But the communication nexus for it all is right here. But Trump has got a major political disaster on his hand. In fact, right now, his poll numbers are lower than Obama's worst poll numbers. That's how rapidly this deteriorated. So if he was being told that the American people were on board with this, he's finding out today that he got lied to again. What's it only been? 2.5 months and already he's a war criminal? I think that's a new record. I think that's a new record. All right, we're going to take some phone calls, clear the phone lines. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. You know, it feels like I got kicked in the head and stabbed while I'm down, or stabbed while I'm up and kicked in the head while I'm down. Donald Trump, I cannot believe, I knew something was coming, and because, Donald Trump, one thing that's weird, he says he never announces his plans, but from what I heard, didn't he tell the Russians a half an hour notice before they did the attack?
Well, that's what they're claiming. They were trying to get out there and say, we're not going to war with the Russians. We're only attacking the Syrians. But some of the sources coming out of Russia are saying that no, they didn't receive any kind of a notification because anybody that is going to notify the Russians we're going to be attacking this air base, they have to know the Russians are going to turn around and tell the Syrians. And now we're hearing that Russians were killed on the ground at that air base. So I don't know how accurate that story is.
I'm hearing 14 now, Mike, and some of them fighting fires. Did you hear what Medvedev said? That he says, this brings us to the brink of a conflict.
Yeah.
I mean, the people he's got surrounding him are not good. When are people going to?
No, they're not good. They're not good. And you know, think about all those troops and all that military hardware that has been parked on the border with Russia. They're not there to work on their suntans. And
like you said,
it looks like the U.S. is going to use Syria to get into war with Russia the way Roosevelt used Pearl Harbor to get us into war against Germany.
Mike, like you said, the Admiral Grigorovich is on its way.
Yep.
And it's not a battleship, it's a frigate, and it carries caliber cruise missiles, which are a hell of a lot more accurate than the old crappy Tomahawks, which obviously a quarter of them didn't even make it, or half of them didn't make it. But, yeah, I mean, there's going to probably be a Boré-class sub following it also. So we got some real freaking problems going on here.
It may already be there. It may already be there. We know that submarines regularly transit the Bosphorus without being seen.
And Tillerson also said that we don't see a role for Assad. So they basically are following the whole Obama, Hillary Clinton, neocon playbook.
Yeah, they are. I mean, you know, beginning of the week, Trump was saying Assad can stay if the Syrian voters vote him in, and then 48 hours later, they start the war. Now, a story I have gotten from more than a few sources, okay, is that the congressional leadership went to Donald Trump and they basically laid down the law and said the war agenda must go forward. And following this gas attack, if you don't buy into this thing and order the cruise missile strike to proceed, then we're going to impeach you. And obviously all the Democrats in Congress are going to vote for impeachment and removal, and all the Republicans who are war hawks, and there's a lot of them, will support it. And so basically what I'm hearing is that Trump was handed an ultimatum. The wars are going to go forward no matter what you do. All you can decide is whether you're going to stay the president or not. And, you know, as of today, the same corporate media that was bashing Donald Trump, they're in love with him. CNN is in love with him. MSNBC is in love with Donald Trump. They think he's wonderful. They think he's great.
Brian Williams said it was a beautiful sight. I wonder if he's going to think it's a beautiful sight when he sees a mushroom cloud outside his window.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous, and I'm furious. Claire's upset, and should probably share some of that with you in hour number 3. Anyway, Dustin, I'm going to let you go. We got a bunch of phone calls, and I want to get through them real quickly and get on back to this stuff, because there's a lot more to come here. Richard in Chicago, aloha, what's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yes, I've called in a couple times in the past. Richard Carey with Truth Cat Radio. Yeah, I am just incredibly frustrated. I mean, so much energy a lot of the independent media put into keeping Hillary Clinton out of office. One of the biggest reasons because she's such a warmonger. And now with Trump, I don't know what to say. I mean, this is just. Yeah, I mean, clearly he's been compromised.
Yes, that's the only possible explanation, because all joking aside, I don't think he's a stupid man. He has to understand that gas story really did not make any sense. The critical mistake was thinking that ordinary Americans were going to fall for it, especially after the last 2 attempts to frame Assad for using gas on his own people, plus that nonsense about Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe that the Americans, population is expected to be this stupid, and they've been trying to get Assad out for 6 years. I noticed this when it was first breaking last night with some of the independent media websites, and Investment Watch blog had a story up. It was entitled "U.S. was not attacked. Trump's strike on Syria divides lawmakers." And that story on Investment Watchdog has already been removed from the website. So
yeah, there's a lot of that going on here. I got an email here from somebody saying that on Fox News this morning, Craig Jarrett tried to justify the strike, saying that Syria had some of Saddam's nuclear weapons and we had to destroy them. So I mean, they're just pulling this stuff they're pulling it out of their rear end, is what they're doing, and flinging it at us. All right, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take 5 more phone calls, the people who are already on hold, and then we're going to close the lines because we still got a lot of stuff to cover today. Steve in California, what's on your mind?
Mike, I share your anger and frustration this morning on this president. who is talking out of the side of his mouth about peace and working with other world leaders for solutions to problems, fair trade, increased commerce, the big lie from Donald Trump. Now he can call himself a war president. He's going to become the judge, the jury, the executioner. I'm very angry at this guy right now.
Oh, okay, well, let's be fair here. It isn't just Donald Trump himself. We're obviously dealing with an entrenched war party with tremendous power and influence. I don't think Donald Trump came into the White House intending to push the war agenda. I think it's been forced on him, and somehow he has been compromised. He's been threatened. And as I said, what I'm hearing from a couple of well-placed sources is that the congressional leadership told Trump, either you go along with the war agenda or we have the votes to impeach you and remove you from office. And so the war is going to...
What grounds for impeachment? They're still pushing that Russia thing. They can't, that doesn't hold any water, the Russia thing, right?
Neither did the gas attack in Idlib. But their approach right now is to make up some absolute fiction and then act as if it's true, and if you don't go along with it, you must be the enemy.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mike, after this attack today, you expect more Syrian refugees to be leaving, and which is going to help the globalist agenda. So I expect more of the more refugees coming into the country.
Yeah, and they're not going to be very, very happy with the countries they're moving to either, and that's a factor. All right, Steve, thanks a lot. We're going to switch over to Lou in California. Aloha, Lou. What's on your mind?
Mike.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Oh, wie geht's? Guten Abend.
Gut, danke.
Hi, Mike. I'm having my lunch right now. But anyway, Mike, as far as you can tell, what's the latest we know as from Tuesday as to who was, if they're investigating, who was really responsible for what happened?
There's no investigation.
It was a war crime.
There's no investigation. Nobody has investigated. No investigation was on. This was a rush job. Tell the lie, drop the bombs. Nobody had a chance to react and push back and say, remember the last 2 times we were lied to about Assad gassing his own people. The indications from the ground are it was a hoax. Some of the so-called dead bodies were videotaped moving. Some people are saying that the photos and videos are actually from another attack from months and years ago. There's more. We're going to be getting into that a little bit further in the show, reasons why this story just doesn't make any sense, okay?
Because, I'm telling you, this whole thing, history is being repeated. This whole thing stinks. I was very suspicious from the start when I heard about this chemical attack. I was like, I don't like what I see here and stuff, and look what's happening at this point and stuff, The Trumpster is getting blasted by the wrong people. He's getting bad advice all over the place. So, in Washington and stuff, and I don't know what hope there is we've got, but I've been praying that, that this war ends and that we don't get into any war with Iran and Russia and China, because, it's going to be nothing but a disaster, and hopefully the Trumpster will awaken soon enough before it's too late, that this has got to stop, and we've got, we've got to investigate who was really benefiting from this war crime on Tuesday.
We don't have to investigate. We already know who benefited and who didn't. Assad didn't benefit. There was absolutely no reason for him to do this. It gained him absolutely nothing. This was all for the benefit of the rebels and the U.S. warhawks and Israel and the military-industrial complex and the private central bankers who are loaning the money out for all of this nonsense.
Yep. Exactly. All right, Mike. I'm just hoping that this will there'll be some hopes, and we got to keep on praying. This whole country needs to pray. that this gets resolved. Diplomatically soon.
Well, everybody needs to scream.
Get out of control fast.
Everybody needs to scream. I mean, if you're on your knees praying, you're exactly where they want you to be because you're harmless. You need to get on the phones and fax machines and email and letters and just scream bloody murder that this is all a war crime. The gas attack was a false flag hoax, and we, the American people, do not believe this, and we do not support the U.S. government on this. We'll be right back after these commercials.
Yeah, Mike,
Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And before I take these last 3 phone calls, I got to report the story. It's just now coming on out. In the best tradition of the U.S. government, which seems to follow the motto, if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. And we have this evolution where there's the Idlib gas attack. Oh, it had to be Bashar al-Assad. Nobody's buying it. Assad had no reason to do it. Obviously, the U.S. and its war hawks did. And now we have this reader email saying that Fox News is saying, well, that Assad had some of Saddam's missing nuclear weapons and they had to be destroyed. And now Associated Press is saying the Pentagon suspects Russia directly participated in that Syrian chemical weapons attack. They're just ramping it up more and more. Oh, it's so horrible. They're following the big lie strategy. If the lie is big enough and shocking enough, people tend to believe it. And one of the big lies you've been told out of history was that Adolf Hitler in his book Mein Kampf advocated its use. No, if you actually read Mein Kampf, he was warning people that it was a propaganda technique they needed to be on guard with, or on guard against, as it were. Now then, here is a little dose of reality. The accusations that there had been a chemical weapon attack happened before the Syrian airstrike. Syria and Russia were saying, we think maybe one of our bombs touched off a rebel chemical weapon factory. Well, that's no longer operative. Apparently, the chemical attack was reported at 6 a.m. The airstrike was at 11 a.m. 5 hours later. The timing doesn't work out. So the Syrian warplanes had nothing to do with it. The Russian warplanes had nothing to do with it. It's just another U.S. government lie. Saddam has nukes. Trust us. The Lusitania wasn't smuggling weapons to Britain. Trust us. Oh, there was a Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. Trust us. There were torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. Trust us. Pearl Harbor was a surprise. Trust us. The lies are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and when they realize nobody's buying the lies anymore, they'll pull another false flag. They'll set off something really big and say, ooh, look what North Korea and Russia and Iran and Syria and China and all those people just did to us. All right, let's take 3 more phone calls, then we're going to close the lines because I got a lot of stuff to cover. Tom in Minnesota, aloha, welcome to the show. I'm sorry, Montana.
Minnesota.
In Minnesota was correct. Okay, what's on your mind?
Yeah, you're talking about their timing there. It's kind of like Building 7 still standing while they're announcing this down. They need to work on their scripts better. You think with their Hollywood connections they could do something.
Well, you know, the problem is they got very sloppy because over the last 50 years, it was very easy to fool the American people. I mean, if you go back now and you look at the materials that survived from the Kennedy assassination, it becomes very obvious the story was nonsense. And, you know, when Kennedy was assassinated, I saved all the magazines and newspaper articles, and I didn't see anything wrong with them until Jim Garrison brought his case against Clay Shaw. Then I went back and I looked at them with fresh eyes, and immediately it leapt out. These things were faked. They were hoaxes. They were lies. And that was, you know, that was my apotheosis, if you will. And we all need to go through that now and just say, we have been lied to so much, we refuse to be lied to ever again. All of you are all full of crud, and we are not going to listen to you anymore.
Yeah, and then Trump goes and uses colorful speech, you know, to get your sympathy, you know. And again, it should be, you know, innocent babies, tiny babies, writhing from these chemical attacks. You know, at best, you know, and again, it would be a tragedy if it was one. Say this happened to 12 babies. And
well,
the
what about the 200
attacked,
civilians, including children, that the U.S. bombed only a couple of weeks ago? Nobody seems to care about them.
Exactly.
What about all the children that starved to death in Iraq through years of economic blockade? I mean, Trump's sympathy is very misplaced. And, you know, I'm not interested in anything he has to say from this point on. Because he's compromised, he's controlled, he's sold out.
Yeah, you showed those pictures on your site of the children from just the bombing. And what about Madeleine Albright and all the millions of Iraqi babies are an acceptable loss?
Yeah.
You know, and droning funerals and weddings. And what about Trump's raid in Yemen where they acknowledged that non-combatant women and children were killed? You know,
Yeah, well, the corporate media is out there saying
to...
you don't want to care about those people, only care about the ones we want you to care about to justify a war. Anyway.
Yeah. Well,
all right.
I wrote both my senators, and I told them Trump has just attacked a nation with 60 cruise missiles without authorization from Congress. He is now a war criminal and needs to be impeached immediately. And even if they don't agree with me, they at least know they've got one dissatisfied constituent.
Well, they need to find out that they've got millions of dissatisfied constituents. Everybody listening to this show, you've got to make as much noise as you can for two reasons. One, to break past any illusions that the government has that the American people are on their side. Remember Nixon and that nonsense about the silent majority? Yes, there's protesters out there against the war, but really the silent majority are all in favor of the war in Vietnam. And that, of course, was another absolute piece of crap. And we need to break past that.
Well,
Second, it is important for the American people to send a message to the people of other nations. We're not believing the government's nonsense. And we are not supporting these wars of aggression. And we need to get that message out to the people of the world.
Yes, and listen to your callers and read the blogs on these websites. Trump has just lost his populist base. It's gone.
Yeah, he's going to be a one-term president if indeed he actually lasts his entire term, or if indeed we actually are still a nation to have elections in 2020, and at that point, that's an even money bet.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. John in Arkansas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, you're right. They got Donald Trump by the short hairs. Alexander Acosta. Did you know that guy in Trump's cabinet? His labor secretary.
Yeah.
He was the district attorney for Southern Florida in 2006 and 2009. He's the one who gave the sweetheart deal to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes.
And I know you probably don't believe it, but the Black Book, that's where Trump's name was found in there. So they got him by the short hairs, and it feels bad to be lied to, right? Almost like kind of where the Iraqi American troops when they went to Iraq, thinking that they were,
yeah,
on the terms of that.
This is Iraq's WMDs all along. And by the way, I apologize. You're in Alaska, not Arkansas. It turns out my little list here of state abbreviations is actually incomplete. It doesn't have Alaska or Hawaii. Of course, I know Hawaii when I see it.
It's okay, that's fine. But here's the real story you gotta look at. I don't know if you reported it yet, but Russia sent their I think they're destroyers or cruisers to go basically confront our ships that launched the
yeah, we did cover that.
Rocket.
We did cover that. Cover that. Yeah, Putin is obviously going to draw the line in the sand right there at Syria, and this is really going to get ugly. Anyway, listen, John, I need to let you go. I'm going to take one more phone call, then we have to close the lines because I'm falling way behind on the talking points. Anthony in California, aloha. What is on your mind today?
Yes, hi, Michael. How are you?
Well, considering that we're on the verge of mushroom clouds all over this rock, I'm holding together.
I just can't get over the shock that Trump, invaded Syria. And I supported the man, and I voted for him, and now this happens.
Before we go there, I think there's too much focus on Donald Trump because obviously if Hillary had stolen the election, this cruise missile attack probably would have happened a month ago. Okay, and I honestly, as angry and disappointed as I am, I honestly think Trump has just been corralled, compromised, and like I said, the word I'm getting from my deep sources is that the leadership in Congress said the war agenda is moving forward. No matter what you do, all you can choose is whether you're going to remain the president or not. And that was the deal that was given to him.
Well, in that case, then, what can he do to fulfill some of his campaign promises to the American people if these people, the New World Order establishment in Washington, has him by whatchamacallit, you know?
Well, yeah, I imagine, well, Trump has already kept many of his campaign promises. Let's not lose sight of that. And I think what the people controlling Donald Trump are probably going to do is, you know, they're going to constrain him to the things they consider to be important points, and the rest of it, you know, Donald Trump can go play with Glass-Steagall or all this other stuff. But at this point, it's very obvious that the President of the United States does not have the power and authority that we all imagine. We're not dealing with a president that's gone rogue. We're dealing with an entire government that's gone rogue. It's a systemic problem. It's a systemic problem.
I just hate to see when there's an economic crash or something that there's a civil war, you know, within the country itself. You know,
well, I don't want to see that either. I don't want to see any more external wars. I don't want to see an internal war. The absolute worst thing that could happen to our nation is to be involved in a world war that we're going to lose and have a civil war at the same exact time, because that's never worked out in history. King John had to deal with that. The last emperor of the Western Empire, what was it, Valian, I think, had to deal with that as well.
Well, Mike, you know, at this point, you know, the question is, you know, will Trump go into Syria now, knowing that Russia has drawn the line?
Well, it would be a mistake, and obviously it was a mistake to send in the cruise missiles anyway, because nobody's buying the cover story. Nobody is buying the cover story, and right now the rest of the world is waking up and realizing the United States government is a loose cannon on deck. They can destroy anybody at whim, and I can't think of anything that's going to unite the rest of the world against the United States than what Donald Trump did last night.
Well, you know, at this point, what can our country do to avoid, you know, any more new world orders that Trump has to get?
Well, at this point, I think we have to stop using the phrase "the country," because it's already split into two parts. There's the U.S. federal government with its war agenda, and there's we, the American people. And right now, like I said, the most important thing that anybody can do is to speak out to their family, to their friends, point out how ridiculous this story about Assad gassing his own people was, all 3 times that they've tried it, remind them about the lie about Saddam's nukes, and just tell them we're on the verge of a world war that could go nuclear, and whether it goes nuclear or not, the United States is probably going to lose it, and the bankers who are financing all of this thing could care less who wins or loses, because they're making money off of both sides.
That's right, Michael. They don't give a, you know, whatchamacallit about us. You know, we're just peasants, you know, to be exterminated. You know, to be made money off of, force us to buy vaccines that may be harmful. If they make us sick, you know, we have to buy more medicine. That's all we are. We're walking wallets to the elites, and that's all we are. And that's exactly how they treat us. Anyway, Anthony, I'm going to let you go. We're closing the phone lines until further notice, because I got to get back to this. Now, Donald Trump apparently realizes now that he has a huge public relations nightmare on his hand, and he's out there trying to defend the airstrikes on Syria as vital to our national security. So, Don, what Americans were killed in that supposed gas attack in Idlib? What sovereign American territory was attacked, invaded, or damaged by Syria? Because absent that, you're not talking about national security, you're talking about economics, conquest, invasion, and stealing other people's wealth to try and pay your way out of this hopelessly unpayable debt created by the private central banks. Now, Donald is already out there trying to spread the blame. He's out there trying to spread the blame, and he's out to say that all of his national security team all agreed that the Syria strike, they all agreed. Don't look at me. They all agreed. They said it was a good thing. All right, so they're all morons and war criminals. That doesn't make this any less of a crime. Rubio's happy about it. McCain's ecstatic. Hillary's on board. She's out there cheering him on. Now that Donald Trump is being a good little boy for the war agenda, everybody loves him again. Somebody asked Senator McCain how he expected Russia to react to this, and McCain came on back and said, I don't care. I don't give a darn. I wonder how he'll feel when there's a mushroom cloud out his office window. Chuck Schumer's cheering Trump on. Nancy Pelosi is cheering Trump on. These were all the people who were dead set against him. ISIS and Al-Qaeda are praising Donald Trump's attack, even though ISIS and Al-Qaeda didn't elect him. A little something to keep in mind there. Of course, Netanyahu is out there saying he supports Trump's decision to bomb Syria. Netanyahu always supports it when American weapons are used to destroy Israel's enemies. That's always a sweet deal for him. Hillary Clinton apparently came out only a couple of days ago saying it's time to destroy Assad's airfields, like she already knew this was going to happen. Angela Merkel is sort of supportive with a qualifier saying that, yes, the strikes were justified by the horrific war crimes being committed by Assad, but really a political solution would have been better. Well, actually, there was a political solution on the way. They were having peace talks up there in Brussels. And that's another reason this Assad gassing his own people story doesn't pass the sniff test. Everybody was talking peace and final settlement. Trump said Assad could stay on. Assad was winning the war. He had no reason to do this stunt. His enemies did. It is such an obvious false flag. And they got to think you're all a bunch of clueless morons to have even thought this was going to have any chance of being a success. Which is why now they're upping the ante. Oh, Assad had Saddam's nuclear weapons. Russia took part in it. It's horrific. Putin has a Death Star. We must go to war. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And obviously, Trump is trying to get world leaders and politicians and celebrities to come on board and say, yes, it was a wonderful thing that he did. To be counting ISIS and Al-Qaeda as on his little cheering squad shows how desperate he is, because certainly the majority of opinion around the world is not very good of Donald Trump and the U.S. government's actions here. A U.S. State Senator, Richard Black, maybe he reads my website, because he was on TV saying, why would Assad attack civilians instead of the rebels with the sarin gas? It's irrational. And he's absolutely right. The story just does not make any sense at all. It never did. Former British ambassador to Syria, Peter Ford, is saying Assad was not behind the chemical attack. And he says those calling for intervention in Syria are like dogs returning to their own vomit. It's a rather ugly image, but I think he's absolutely right, because we've seen this vomit before. Saddam's nukes. Assad gassed his people 2013. Assad gassed his people 2014. Article coming out of RINF.com. It's WMD all over again. Why don't you see it? Well, actually, I think pretty much everybody does see it. I have not met anybody in person who is buying this story. Not a single one. Now, remember, we did some flashback stories the other day where the Pentagon trained Syria's Al-Qaeda rebels in how to use these chemical weapons. There was an article that came out in 2013. It was yanked from the website shortly thereafter, but it appeared in the Mail Online. This was the headline: U.S.-backed plan to launch chemical weapon attack on Syria and blame it on Assad's regime. That's clearly what has happened here. And everybody's looking at this dramatic reversal
Article out of Politico, Trump's Syria whiplash. President Trump went from saying Bashar Assad could stay to bombing Syria in mere days. Donald Trump is on a leash and somebody yanked it good and hard. Another article out here from Prison Planet, Just Say No. Trump being pressured by neocons to attack Syria. I'm pretty sure Trump can resist pressure. I think he was threatened, either with removal from office or something worse. And going back to 2013, Trump put out an all-caps tweet, "Don't attack Syria. It's an attack that will bring nothing but trouble for the U.S." Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are closed. We're keeping them closed because we got a lot of stuff to cover here. And earlier in the show, first hour, we reported there's a new poll out now that has Donald Trump's approval rating below the worst that Barack Obama ever had. Newsweek, on the other hand, has come on out with an article saying that Trump's approval rating will get a boost from the Syria strike. So they're still pouring on the bovine excrement as hard as they can, trying to prove that they're still in control of what you, the American people, are thinking. And I think they're finding out, no, they aren't. So they're just going to throw more lies out there because that's what they do. But the reality here is, for whatever reason, Donald Trump is now more of a warmonger than Barack Obama was. So any day now we can expect him to get the Nobel Peace Prize. We now have to ask the question, who's really in charge of this nation? We have clearly lost the government that is described in that Constitution, between the rigged elections, the monetary power, the lobbying, and the rest of it. And there's an article that came out of Russia today asking if the United States is actually being run by the intelligence community, and are they unhinged and out of control? To which I would say yes, yes, and yes. Another article from The Real News, is Trump going to commit the next great American catastrophe in Syria? He just did. The U.S. government has wanted Assad out for going on 6 years. They went on in screaming, he's abusing his own people. That fell apart. Oh, we're only there to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda. That didn't work. So now they're back to, Assad is gassing his own people. If at first you don't succeed, lie again, because those American people, they're all morons and idiots, and they don't think about what's going on. They're distracted with Kim Kardashian and all the rest of that. Syria used to be a beautiful country. Now we have over 500,000 Syrian people are dead. Half the population is displaced, many of them now in Europe. They're under constant aerial bombardment. So is Iraq. The U.S. committed a major atrocity in Mosul. 200 civilians were killed. Yeah, no big deal. None of this has the approval of the Security Council. None of this has a congressional declaration of war. Now, they may be backing off. The White House may have realized they definitely bit off more than they could chew with regard to the American people. Because now they're coming out saying that their policy on Syria has not changed. This was a one-off attack to punish for the chemical weapon attack, and will not be repeated. No more attacks are coming. Of course, they say that all the time. The damage is done, not just to Syria, but to America's, the U.S. government's reputation and image around the world. So like I said in hour number 1, every other world leader now sees the U.S. government as dangerous, as rogue. Just make up some kind of a fictional lie and attack. Take them over. Israel is still out there trying to claim that Assad has built chemical weapons factories all over Syria, and that Assad wants to gas the Jewish people. The lies are just getting bigger and bigger and more absurd. There's no proof for any of it, and the attitude seems to be, if you're demanding proof, well, you're not being a patriotic, loyal American. How dare you demand we prove anything to you? We're the government. You just believe what we tell you. No, not after being lied to as many times as we've been lied to by this government. Now, Putin called, understandably, for an emergency UN Security Council meeting over Trump's act of aggression. Of course, the U.S. having a veto at the Security Council, nothing will be done. They'll scream at each other for a while, and nothing will be done, one way or the other. Now, Nikki Haley demanded that the Security Council resolution be public, televised, in order to try and shame Assad's defenders in full public view. And apparently, Nikki Haley has gone so far overboard that the Russian ambassador to the United Nations has formally complained about Nikki Haley's constant stream of insults toward Russia and Putin. There's supposed to be a certain amount of decorum at the Security Council. It's not supposed to look like the British Parliament. Meanwhile, we need to remember all those troops and weapons parked along the border with Russia. And apparently hundreds of British battle tanks have joined in, arriving in Estonia. I don't think they're all over there to work on their suntans. Very clearly, somebody wants an outright war with Russia, and we are going to lose it. And Russia is a nuclear power. We're going to do a little shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, do you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis? A little bit of history there. The U.S. put nuclear missiles in Turkey aimed at Russia. Russia responded by putting nuclear missiles in Cuba. And the situation escalated and got within a hair's breadth of a nuclear exchange. And it didn't happen because Kennedy and Khrushchev were convinced that the other party did not really want to use nuclear weapons. And so finally they made an arrangement. They made a deal. And they calmed things down. We have a different situation today where every other leader of a nuclear power sees the U.S. as being very willing to use nuclear weapons because of just how reckless and irresponsible they're behaving right now, and because the United States is the only nation that ever has actually used nuclear weapons of mass destruction on the civilians of another country. There won't be that pause on the button. Khrushchev had to fight off huge amounts of pressure from his hardliners saying, launch now, launch now. Kennedy's going to launch. We have to strike first. Putin will get exactly the same thing, and he will not be in a position to say, I don't think Trump really wants to turn that key or use the card or however it is they trigger those things off. Donald Trump just made, well, again, it's not just Donald Trump. The American war hawk cabal has just made this world a much more dangerous place. They're practically guaranteeing that if there is a new world war, and it seems to have already started, that it will go nuclear. We ended World War II with nuclear weapons. We could start World War III with nuclear weapons. Now, here's a very interesting little story. Apparently, over in Poland, at a border town with Ukraine, 2 Ukrainian women were arrested for trying to smuggle in a 30-millimeter anti-aircraft gun into Poland from Ukraine. The crates were labeled hydraulic machinery. And the obvious question is, did Poland just foil a coming false flag shoot-down of a passenger plane to be blamed on somebody? Because Poland has lots of anti-aircraft weapons. They don't need to have any smuggled in from Ukraine. So there's something very funny going on over there. Been another terror attack, this in Stockholm, Sweden. Truck has rammed into people in the street. and they're considering it a possible terrorist attack. So, Sweden, how's that open borders idea working out for you? Now that you're the rape capital of the world and soon to be the terror capital of the world. Meanwhile, going on back down to Israel, Netanyahu is out there screaming that Israel needs a buffer zone against Iran and Hezbollah on Syria's borders with Israel and Jordan. Now, what he's really talking about is he wants the UN to agree to carve off a big chunk of Syria and make it Israel's buffer zone. It's the same tactic they use to erode the Palestinian land. They'll say, we need a buffer zone, a security zone, and they'll take the land, then they'll build on it, settlements and stuff. And then they'll say, oh, we need a new buffer zone, and they go and grab some more. And they're trying to do that because what Netanyahu really wants is permanent ownership of the oil and gas under the Golan. They're already drilling it out and harvesting it and selling it, but it's still technically Syria's property. And Israel covets it. The Israeli media are pointing to the cruise missile attack on Syria and saying it's revenge for Syria daring to shoot down Israel's plane that was bombing them. It's amazing. Now, a little bit of good news. As you know, Nunez was forced to step down from leadership of the Russia investigation because he was hit with some obviously politically timed ethics charges that he needs to deal with, supposedly over his what is claimed to be inappropriate communications with the White House. The good news is Trey Gowdy is taking over. And that is a very, very good thing because Trey Gowdy knows that this Trump-Russia alliance thing was nonsense. And obviously, following the cruise missile attack and how the U.S. and Russia are now glaring at each other, making stink face, obviously Trump is not an ally of Putin. So that was never true either. Now, getting on to Obamagate, because we are not letting that one go, no matter how many innocent people are blown up by the deep state around the world. Fox News is saying the surveillance on Donald Trump, carried out by the intelligence agencies and apparently directed in part by Susan Rice and CIA Director Brennan, was running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And now we have a leak coming out from a retired CIA officer saying that, yes, Susan Rice was using the information provided by the CIA for political gains. Former officer of the CIA, Scott Eulinger, revealed that Susan Rice did abuse her power and should be investigated. Others are going an even a step further. Senator Ron Johnson is out there saying, what we do know about Susan Rice is you cannot believe what she says. A description that fits pretty much everybody inside the Beltway. And Representative Ron DeSantis is saying it's time for criminal charges against Susan Rice. And he's correct about that as well. And we're not going to let the wars distract us from the problems with our own country, because the corruption in our federal government is why we are hovering at the edge of World War III. Now, a little bit of victory for Donald Trump. The Senate finally approved Gorsuch for the Supreme Court after all that Sturm und Drang, and all that theater about the nuclear option, filibusters and everything. Gorsuch is now going to the Supreme Court, and we once again will have 9 Supreme Court justices, no ties, no deadlocks, and the Supreme Court can get some business done. Apparently, things are cooling between Great Britain and Spain regarding Gibraltar, and they're talking about basically sharing it now, where the sovereignty of Gibraltar will be split between Spain and Britain. And so hopefully that's going to calm down and we will not see a war between Britain and Spain here. Now, speaking of war, we're going to talk about the economic news here a little bit. Do you remember that harebrained oil price war that was started to try and wreck Russia's economy? And it did harm Russia's economy a little bit because they're an oil and gas exporter, but Russia's economy was far more resilient and far more self-reliant than expected, and much of the damage from that oil price war actually backflashed onto other oil-producing nations such as Venezuela, and we know what they're going through right now. Fracking companies here in the U.S. were driven out of business by collapsing oil prices. It drove Saudi Arabia into having to issue their first government bonds in decades to pay their bills, and they're still dealing with that economic fallout. Canada's oil industry got hurt. So, having failed miserably before, well, let's just do it again and hope for a better outcome. So we're looking at this article coming out of oilprice.com about a new oil price war coming out between Saudi Arabia versus Russia. And what's going to complicate that is the news that came out the other day that Iraq is ready to go rogue on OPEC and increase production by the end of the year. Yeah. We've been talking about how the Westinghouse nuclear unit has been forced into bankruptcy. And apparently the ramifications are rather serious because those utilities that use the Westinghouse reactors are now cut off from support. And there were some power stations that were approved for construction that were going to use the Westinghouse reactor. Now they got to pull back, retool, and shop for something else. So there's a domino effect coming out of that one. Now, apparently, and this is reported by Bloomberg, White House economic advisor Gary Cohn dropped a bombshell at a meeting on Capitol Hill yesterday, saying that there is congressional support on both sides of the aisle for bringing back Glass-Steagall to basically split commercial banks off from everything else. And they should have done that long ago. They should have kept Glass-Steagall. But because Citigroup violated Glass-Steagall, rather than tell Citigroup, no, you can't merge with Travelers, they just repealed Glass-Steagall. And that opened the door to all the abuses we saw in 2008. And so they're going to reinstate Glass-Steagall, which was another one of Trump's campaign promises, but the damage has already been done. Yes, this will curb future abuses until some future politician says, oh, we don't need Glass-Steagall. Wall Street can regulate itself and all will be hunky-dory. We seem to get that every 2 or 3 decades. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open the phone lines here for the rest of this hour. 800-313-9443. Apparently up in Chicago, the Immigrations and Custom Enforcement raided a home occupied by legal immigrants, legal citizens. They've owned the home for decades, and they walked on in and they shot the homeowner. And ICE is claiming he had a gun, and the family is saying he doesn't even own a gun. And they opened fire on the homeowner. There were children, babies, sleeping nearby, and they just hauled off and started shooting. That's not going to look very, very good. And I think 2 things need to happen. I think that anybody in any branch of law enforcement who is authorized to carry a firearm should not be allowed to be on prescription antidepressants. Step 1. Step 2 is we need to change the training of these armed individuals to get back to de-escalation of a confrontation rather than escalation to somebody's death or injury. Now, up in Seattle, a sanctuary city, apparently the mayor of Seattle has been accused of child molestation, statutory rape. Apparently he was having sex with underage boys who were addicted to crack cocaine, and he would pay them $10 every time. So it was voluntary on the part of the kids, but they're underage, and that makes it statutory rape. What is it about political power that draws these very, very sick individuals? That's what I want to know. All right, let's talk a little bit about human-caused global warming. I just got a reader email from up in Toronto, Canada. They're getting snowed on. And apparently, climatologists who are not on Al Gore's payroll are saying we will not see any warming on planet Earth until 2100. Canada, by the way, set snow records this last winter. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And in another indicator that the U.S. government realizes they may have overstepped, the Pentagon is now saying that they want to continue the communication with Russia regarding flight safety over Syria. They do not want to get into any conflict between American and Russian assets. I don't think Russia's going to agree to that. In fact, they're saying they're cutting off that communications hotline with the Pentagon as of tomorrow. Now, remember where I mentioned earlier in the show how the White House had come on out and said our policy towards Syria has not changed, and this was a one-off attack in retaliation for the chemical weapon attack by Assad on his own people, blah, 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 blah. Now, apparently, over at the United Nations, Nikki Haley is saying, yes, there will be more attacks on Syria.
Russian President Vladimir.
And let me turn that down. That was... So, I mean, they're not even keeping their story straight. Let's take some phone calls. Brendan in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
So much going on, Mike. As you always say, there's usually more than one agenda at work, and you took some of my theme with the Obamagate. Notice that's kind of dropped out of the headlines for the most part. But
not around here.
The other part was the Israeli jet being shot down last week from the same base that the attack occurred. But what I've seen from Steve Pajenik was he's saying that this was more a message to Korea than anything else. What I'd like to emphasize is let's see how the left treats Trump from this point forward. It looks like he's their new hero, I guess. And, you know, Trump is, the longer he's in office, we're finding some compromising things. For example, the Border Patrol agents feel like they've been betrayed because Trump has appointed the former head, Kevin McLean, which he was the guy implementing all the open border stuff. So we really need to keep an eye on that. And Gorsuch is a CFR member, and it looks like Trump really has surrounded himself with a bunch of CFR folks.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're right about that. As far as the message for North Korea is concerned, they're going to get the wrong one. The fact that the U.S. just created this story out of whole cloth about Assad gassing his own people for the third time is sending a message to North Korea and everybody else that the U.S. is capable of making up some kind of a fairy tale and then attacking you on that basis without any warning. And if anything, this is going to harden North Korea's resolve to retain and enlarge its nuclear arsenal and its ballistic missiles.
Right. Listen, I think the message also that may be sent is that, look, Trump isn't in control, and we are crazy. We will fly off the handle. It's so suspect because it's almost like they want Trump to look bad. With the no evidence and no Security Council, even Trump could have said, okay, Congress, you have to authorize this. He could have pushed back on this. This guy looks like he's been totally compromised, and that's the most disheartening thing of all, is that we fought so hard to get this guy in there, and now it just looks like they're throwing it in our face that, yeah, ha-ha, vote all you want. You have no control.
Yeah, well, that's certainly the message Americans are getting right now, no question about it.
Well, listen, I want to make a point that people need to start thinking about their tax dollars and where they're being spent. And if we can somehow manage to take control of where our tax dollars are being wasted, maybe that's our last resort, is that we have to take our tax revenue back and direct it back to the country. I mean, this is a free-for-all from what I can see.
It is a free-for-all. And again, it goes back to this idea, the conventional wisdom that we have inside of Washington, D.C., that without a new world war, our nation will collapse because we don't have any manufacturing that anybody wants to buy. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. And nations are starting to refuse to use the U.S. dollar for cross-border trade and banking. Brendan, got to let you go. Got to do another commercial break here. We'll be right back with more phone calls. Aloha, pardon me, and aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Our web server is under heavy attack again. And it's not just me. Apparently, Syrian media websites suffered a massive denial of service attack. Their IT experts traced it back to the United States. No surprise there. So the deep state, the establishment, whatever you want to call them, they are absolutely, desperately panicked that the American people are not believing the lies anymore. And, you know, they're behaving like children. They're behaving like spoiled children. This all is fair. We're the government. We don't have to play by the rules. Morality and ethics, those are for the weak people here. Reminds me of that line from the first Harry Potter movie. There's no such thing as right and wrong. There's simply power and those too weak to seek it. All right, we're going to take a few more phone calls here. Mike in Kentucky, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Posted, I think, on your Facebook page a screenshot of what that computer's internet security section looked like the other day. It had this little disclaimer on the bottom. It said no content was available, and it had a little disclaimer on the bottom. It said something like all the material could be shared and was not under fair use or something. I showed it to somebody, and they said, "Oh, that's obviously a fake page." But anyway, I was able to go around and get that to load, but.
We're under attack. We've had something like 30 attacks just this morning, and we're in the middle of another one right now. The site is unfortunately unreachable.
Well, I had a relative, sort of a distant relative, join Facebook recently, and they were encountering a bunch of the shenanigans with when they went back and looked at their posts, things were being misspelled, and I tried to explain it as it possible, compression errors or forward error correction problems, but I was looking for the Joint Special Operations University manual on blogs and information warfare, and I stumbled across the Drain the Swamp. Have you ever seen that one?
Yeah.
It's the Joint Special Operations.
Yes.
It's like the Trump campaign PSYOP manual or something. It's about Morocco, but it's talking about the linkages between urban conditions and domestic terrorist groups, and how to deal with the social and physical needs of that population to preempt social unrest and a potential for support of extremist groups. So, but that's called Beyond Draining the Swamp, the Joint Special Operations Manual from 2006. I saw that in the title, and I'm just like, it's almost like his campaign was sort of code words for people that would get that,
Yes.
Is that what Trump is about? A steam valve to preempt the unrest that was about to occur in America, perhaps if Hillary was elected. But increasingly over the years, I've noticed that there is a cultural, estrangement between people of flyover country, seen by urbanites as hicks.
Yes.
So I see that as that might be a way to draw battle lines for a civil war between flyover country that supported Trump and the urbanites, in the east and left coast. People talk about how would the Civil War happen if they could get one going.
Well, I think if you discard all the labels, all civil wars come down to it's an internal revolution. Where the government just oppresses the people too much, and the people start fighting back, and the government, those people who've become very wealthy and powerful under the patronage of the government. Will go along with the government side. And I hate to see a civil war in this country. The wrong people always get killed and those sorts of things. But this nation's obviously heading for a crisis. Either a civil war, a world war, or an absolute collapse of the federal government. And obviously I would favor that third option because the fewest people would die in that process. I think that the best thing that we can hope for right now is that the federal government collapse the way the former Soviet Union did. And we're seeing indications that this is going to happen.
I'm reading the from a lot of people that the national debt, there's no way the U.S. can mathematically default on the national debt because they could cancel it.
Well, they have defaulted in the past, and they could cancel the debt as well. Frankly, Congress still has the authority to revoke the charter of the Federal Reserve anytime they want, but the Federal Reserve and Wall Street in general basically pour huge amounts of money into political campaigns in order
You pointed that out in the all wars are bankers wars,
yes.
Saying they can buy back the stock of the Federal Reserve if they wanted to. And cancel that out.
Yeah, they could at any time. But the problem was once they found ways to allow corporations to donate unlimited amounts of money to politicians, we became a corporatocracy, or in other words, fascist government.
Free speech for the corporate citizens, but not the natural persons.
Yep.
Hey, I'll let you go.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to go to Rick in Arizona. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, what's on my mind is I saw that Russian drone video of the Air Force base in Syria, and the 59 cruise missiles in one pop. Well, I don't think they did anything to this Air Force base. It's going to take a daring raid with B-52s in advance of dogfighters to even get near this thing.
Well, the B-52s would have been shot down. The B-52s would have been shot down. The cruise missile's designed to be a deep penetration weapon, but 37 of them...
They didn't do nothing to it. You can see the video. That thing looks like nothing hit it.
37 missed the target completely. Nobody even knows where they went. The U.S. may have killed more civilians with those missiles in Syria, Iraq, and Iran than supposedly died in that gas attack.
Yeah, I mean, you can't penetrate. If you want to knock out this Air Force base, you got a big problem. That's all I can say. All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just had a conversation with my sister and brother talking about this, who both voted for Hillary, and they're excoriating Trump for making this attack on Syria, and I agree. I think it was awful, horrible. I feel completely betrayed, but I said to them, you should love this. I feel betrayed. I voted for what Trump said he wouldn't do, which is go into Syria, tweak Russians' nose needlessly. But you guys, that's exactly what you voted for with Hillary. You should feel vindicated and ecstatic about this. But what's amazing me, Mike, is the people who are coming out and cheering, like Pelosi and Schumer and all the corporate media who are now applauding him, who are just trying to impeach him just the other day. And now, because it's for Israel, and, we're ready to get that buffer zone for Israel, now, and they're willing to let us go head-to-head with the Russians in order to do it. Now it's okay, and Trump's okay, and he's really come up big. It just drives me nuts.
It does me too, but now that Donald Trump is being a good little boy for the Warhawks, they all love him.
Mike, I want to point out something. The other day, you guys were talking about how the BDS movement and how corporations are now being penalized with not being able to do business with the government at any level, state, federal, local, whatever, if they try to participate in the BDS movement. And I just want to point out that didn't Citizens United, the heinous Citizens United, give them the rights of people to do whatever they wanted?
Well, it gave, you're absolutely right. There's a valid argument right there that boycotting these companies for supporting BDS is a violation of their First Amendment rights, and the whole point of Citizens United was to say that corporations do have a right to freedom of speech. And you're right, that is actually a legal argument that could be taken into court.
Except for Israel, Mike.
Yep.
All this for Israel, guys.
No question.
Wouldn't even be in Syria without them.
Yep. All righty. Well, listen, we're going to let you go here, and we're running out of time, so we're going to take a few more phone calls, then we're going to close the lines when Claire gets in here. Steve from Victoria, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. No, I'm just phoning in regards to the question you asked earlier. Why does these do the sick thing they do, like child abuse, all that? It's all about life-sustaining energy. Like when you live and breathe life like the way they do, and a lot of them, they know it's a life. So thinking like that, they're not generating any life-sustaining energy. Henceforth, they have to get it from kids, where it is still pure.
I don't think that really has anything to do with it. I think it's partly the thrill of doing something so vile and getting away with it. It's a statement of power to be able to do that. Anyway, listen, Steve, we're going to let you go here and switch over to James in Charlotte. James, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Hi, Mike. You got another caller that's going nuts about what I've been hearing. I'm going to tell you something. I would not be surprised to see Donald Trump's approval rating go up, at least in the short term. I was up quite late into the wee hours last night, catching up on some office work, and I listened to a number of different stations that had call-ins, and I kind of kept track of the call-ins, and there was well more than half, I would say probably 2/3 or more, that approved of the Syria strike.
Well, listen, hang on. Part of the propaganda going through the corporate media is they literally will have people who are paid to call into the shows to push the agenda. It's called grassroots lobbying, and it's a service that's offered by public relations firms where they'll have people post comments on blogs or call into talk radio shows and push a given agenda, or at least try and make them look silly or otherwise distort the issues under discussion here. Anyway, James, we're going to let you go and go to Jesse in Ohio. Aloha, Jesse. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just heard you say a little bit ago that Sweden was leading for rape, for number one in rape.
Yes.
And I started thinking, if we're told that America has a rape culture, Mike, I think this is cultural appropriation. And I think liberals need to get on that. We need to stop all that rape. That's only for us here, right?
Well, the cultural appropriation, you're absolutely correct, because in the past, the generally accepted behavior has been that when you go to another country, you will integrate into that culture. You will speak that language. You will follow their laws and so forth and so on. But with this push toward globalism, they're trying to blur all the cultures together. We even have U.S. public schools teaching Islam to American kids at taxpayer expense. They're trying to just get everybody confused so we don't have a solid sense of our own identity. Because people who've got a strong sense of who they are, where they came from, what their history is, they're much harder to manipulate than people who are just confused about who they are, what their culture should be, what restroom to use. And that's what's behind all of this attempt to erase our history, get rid of the Confederate flag, tell students who are wearing red, white, and blue that they're being racist and they're committing microaggressions against the illegal immigrants and all this other nonsense.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Well, that was all.
All right, well, we're going to switch over to Jeff in Montana. Aloha, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for taking the call. I'm one of the people of the school that thought that we were really being run by the military, that there was a white hat military coup, and Trump is their front guy. And he lost me back when I saw the cabinet selection go down, and now he said he will never let us down. I think he's let us down tremendously. I don't understand what part of thou shalt not kill he doesn't understand.
Well, again, looking at the short amount of time between when he said Assad can stay and the attack on Syria, to me, that doesn't show Donald Trump having a rethink. That shows to me that, yeah, Donald Trump was given an ultimatum, And again, what I'm getting from my sources is the congressional leadership went to Trump and said, the war agenda is going to continue no matter what you do. If you do not respond to this gas attack by going along with the cruise missile strike, we will impeach you for failure to protect our national interests or whatever else they're going to come up with. And with all the Democrats and half the Republicans who are war hawks, they've got the votes to impeach him. And so basically they said, you can't do a thing to stop the war. All you can do is decide if you're going to continue to be the president or not. And I obviously...
So why didn't they dump it? Why didn't he dump it back in Congress's lap and make them make the decision to do it, as he should have done?
Because they were rushing this thing. It was a rush job because they understood people were not buying this. Assad gassed his own people. And the longer they waited, the greater opposition around the world was going to build that, you can't make this statement without some kind of evidence. And now, of course, the lies are coming thick and fast. Assad had some of Saddam's missing nukes. They had to be destroyed. Russia directly participated in the chemical attack. They're just flinging as much pasta against the wall as they can and hoping some of it's going to stick, but none of it is.
You heard the scuttle on some of the other talk shows today. The theory here is that Trump actually made a masterful chess move, that airbase contained weapons that were agreed upon to be destroyed, and him and the Russians made the decision to take up the retired Tomahawk missiles and clean out the inventory all in one step. Let's Trump look strong. Nobody really got killed. They didn't even pit the runway at that base, and now he can go negotiate with China, Korea, and Russia with strength.
Again, I don't see that being the message that went out. The rest of the world did not get a message of strength. They got a message of reckless aggression and poorly considered thought. It's one thing if there's a real enemy and a real attack that Trump acts decisively against. But remember, we weren't attacked. No Americans were killed in Syria in that Idlib gas attack. No sovereign American territory was attacked, invaded, or destroyed. Everybody knows the Assad gassing story was a hoax anyway, and that has created an image of Donald Trump as being out of control and reckless, and the U.S. government and military with him. And that's going to make it much harder to get other nations to pull back on their defense military spending, including nuclear. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to grab a couple more phone calls before the top of the hour. Chris in Portland. Aloha. What is on your mind today?
Hello, Mike?
Yes, you're on the air. Hello? I think we just lost him here. Let's move to Mike in Maryland. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, great show as always. Thank you for taking my call. Have you heard the Alex Jones / InfoWars take on the bombing of the Syrian base?
No, I have not.
Okay, basically they're saying that they're doing Assad a big favor because they're destroying the base where the chemical weapons were kept. And so if another chemical attack occurs, then they can't blame Assad for it anymore because we destroyed their chemical weapons at that base. Now, have you ever heard anything more ridiculous than that?
Not by a wide margin here, because if you blow up chemical weapons, they're going to go out and they're going to kill somebody. But you know what they're trying to resell this story. They know people are not buying this, and so they're trying to embellish it. In fact, I was just watching on Fox. They're responding to Russia's statement that this cruise missile attack had to be planned a long time in advance by saying, well, we always have these plans ready to go. We always have these emergency plans ready, and we put them into effect. And so they're already reactive. They're on the defensive on this thing, and they're coming up with all this nonsense about Russia directly taking part in it. Now, a little bit of good news. Apparently, Russia and the U.S. have agreed to retain that deal to keep Russian and American aircraft away from each other and avoid the conflict. But I don't know how long that's going to hold together, because the U.S. government has just demonstrated they are back to their original agenda of getting rid of Bashar al-Assad.
Well, and it's not just the bombing of the base. It's the fact that Trump has surrounded himself with neocons, CFR members, and a bunch of backstabbers, and his cabinet appointees that could potentially do some good, they're all falling like dominoes. They're either recusing themselves or dropping out or losing their cabinet post.
Yeah, we're getting a good view of the deep state right now. And remember what we've always said around here, the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it and everybody is watching how the systemic problems with the federal government are even able to constrain and control a president.
I'm just about ready to throw Trump under the bus. I'm just so disappointed.
It's not just Trump, okay? We all wish Trump had been stronger. It's the government as a whole. And as we keep learning every 4 years, just changing the president isn't going to change anything else. We have to change the government itself, hopefully by a Soviet Union-style collapse.
Yeah, but he could be doing more anyway. But, yeah, maybe a collapse might be the best thing to happen. Thank you.
At this point, I would tend to agree with you. We're going to grab a real quick call from Chris in Las Vegas. What's on your mind? Oh, no, there's the music. Chris, I'm sorry. Going to have to let you go. We're closing the phone lines for the rest of the show so that Claire can talk about what she needs to talk about. We'll be back with the lady Claire after a brief station identification. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here, and for those of you watching on BAM User TV, this gorgeous creature seated beside me is the lovely Lady Claire, who will sit in on hour number 3 on our Fridays with her unique perspective on the world. And what's the first thing you want to talk about?
The first thing I want to talk about is how completely angry I was to look at the news crawl yesterday and understand that my government had bombed the heck out of a Syrian military base. And so I have something to say to the people of Syria. I'm sorry.
Wait, Americans, it wasn't our fault.
No, what I'm saying is Americans are not in control of what their government does. And by the way, just in case you didn't know, tornadoes hit D.C. earlier this week, and high winds brought down cherry trees at the Jefferson Memorial.
Well, there's a message from the deity.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And, you know, I was thinking about this yesterday, because Thursday nights, as some of you know, are my nights to yell at Methodists lovingly. I conduct a small church choir, and I was so angry that I started to cry, and I had to just suck it up and not cry. Because I had to be strong for Mike, and I had to be strong for my kids who sing with me. But it took every bit of discipline I had, and I've got to tell you, it was hard. And one of the most powerful things a leader can exhibit is restraint. And what President Trump did yesterday was took any notion of having the ability to act with restraint, and upon actual factual information, he flushed it right down the commode of public opinion, both here and overseas. Mike, he acted like a Neanderthal with high-tech weapons. He bombed that airbase because he could.
Well, again, I don't think this was Trump himself.
No.
I think he was corralled and compromised.
Yeah.
Maybe that reader wrote in and said maybe Gorsuch was part of the payoff, along with not impeaching him. Bomb Syria, and we'll go ahead and confirm Gorsuch for the Supreme Court. We don't know the circumstances. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We do know that this is certainly not what Donald Trump's policy and position has been previously.
No.
We know he went from saying Assad could stay on as president of Syria to bombing Syria and attacking Assad in the space of just 48 hours. To me, that clearly indicates it came from outside, that Trump has been compromised, he's under control, and again, the sources I have are saying that congressional leaders went to Trump and simply said, we have enough votes to impeach you if you don't respond to this gas attack. So the war agenda is going to continue no matter what you do, and all you can choose is whether you're going to stay on as president or not. And because, again, the 180 that he did, the whiplash on this policy, tells us that he was yanked from outside. We saw the exact same thing with Chief Justice of the Supreme Court Roberts on Obamacare. Against. All of a sudden, I'm in favor of it, voted it through.
Runs off to Malta.
So the reporters can't find him.
And the Wall Street Journal has, of course, gone along. President shows he's willing to act forcefully and quickly. The word that they didn't use at the end of quickly should be wrongly. And apparently the entire national security team was all on board for this.
Well, that's Trump trying to spread the blame now that he realizes this is backflashing on him. And they're lining up all the people who think this is a good thing. And as the callers have already pointed out, it's all the people who hated Donald Trump during the campaign. Pelosi's in love with him now. Chucky Schumer's in love with him now. McCain's ecstatic. McCain is having orgasms over this.
Yeah, and but unfortunately in the blast at that Syrian airbase, I heard the opening salvos to World War III. And the video Brian Williams showed on MSNBC of the air attack he called beautiful, give me a flipping break. I'm sorry. The destruction of human lives is never beautiful. And I think the reason that Schumer and Pelosi are kind of on board with this, because it's ultimately in Israel's best interest to see Bashar al-Assad be regime changed.
Well, Israel's always ecstatic anytime U.S. weapons are used to bomb Israel's enemies, and Netanyahu's already out there saying, oh, this is a wonderful thing, this is great.
And what really just gets me so furious, apparently President Trump is pretty comfortable doubling down on war crimes. We're already complicit in the war crimes in Syria, where the U.S. has sold the Saudi government the bombs and the depleted uranium weapons.
And the white phosphorus.
And the white phosphorus. Yeah. There is this massive spike in birth defects, stillbirths, cancers in Yemen. And it's because of the exposure to depleted uranium. But where the darned heck is Trump for those kids? You know?
They can't be used for the agenda. I mean, look at the 200 people that the U.S. admits killing, the civilians, including women and children in Mosul.
Yeah.
No, they're not important. But, these kids who were killed with this horrible gas attack in Idlib, and some of whom were still seen moving in the video and peeking out to see if the camera had gone by.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're important and they matter. So Donald Trump is unfortunately he's been captured by the neocons.
Yep.
He's a war criminal.
Yep.
Which means any minute he's going to get his Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
And
of course.
We're going to do a quick shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And the voice you hear with me, of course, is the lovely Lady Claire.
It appears that Trump now has been bought, compromised, however you want to say it.
Doesn't really matter.
No. He's just another neocon puppet. And it has been said by the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov that the U.S. missile attack on Syria was de facto in the interests of the terrorists, of the jihadists.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it shows how bogus this whole war has been, because the U.S. has been trying to get Assad out for going on 6 years. And they tried first by saying Assad is a cruel tyrant, he's gassing his own people. They tried that when in 2013 was discredited, 2014 was discredited. So then they turn around and say, well, we're not really making war on Assad and Syria, we're there to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda, we just keep missing them and bombing Assad's assets. Well, nobody bought that lie either, so now they're just back to saying, well, we're going to get rid of Assad because he's gassing his own people. And if you dare mention that we lied about that in 2013 and 2014, then you're obviously in cahoots with the Russian propagandists.
Yeah, one thing I notice is that the administration appears to be closer to its goal of creating safe zones within Syria.
In other words, carving out a chunk for the future Kurdistan.
RPT, responsibility to protect, masked. It's a masked invasion is what it is.
That's it. And by the way, okay, that's a completely made-up phrase, a responsibility to protect.
Yeah.
Okay? The United States does not have a responsibility to protect anybody other than U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
And this idea that the U.S. has a right to go in and militarily intervene in Syria because supposedly Assad gassed his own people with a banned chemical weapon doesn't make any sense, because, again, back at Waco, Texas, the U.S. government gassed a church full of women and children to death with a banned chemical weapon. That does not give Russia the right to militarily intervene in the United States, or for any country for that matter.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous idea, and it comes out of this arrogant attitude that the United States is exceptional and that we are the world's policeman. And even Marine Le Pen was on Trump's case saying the world doesn't need the U.S. to be the policeman. Each nation is perfectly capable of taking care of itself.
Right. And I cannot begin to express, at least in language I can use on the radio, my sense of betrayal by President Trump for opting to this, and yes, he was coerced, well, however you want to say it.
It doesn't really matter. He did it. Remember what Harry Truman said, the buck stops here. And so Donald Trump, I don't care the circumstances that led you into doing this. You did it. You signed off on it. You get to bear the responsibility in the history books, and you just made yourself a single-term president.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to back you in 2020.
No.
The only way I would back you in 2020 is if Hillary runs again.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Let's just hope and pray that doesn't happen.
Well, I'm still rooting for a Soviet Union-style collapse of the federal government.
Yeah, I hear you. But that sense of betrayal, it's almost as though I want to get a T-shirt that says, unfortunately, President Trump is my president.
Well, actually, I burned my Trump is my president T-shirt last night.
Ah, okay.
Took me a long time to get that smoke alarm to shut off.
Right. Yeah, it was pretty rough. Now, we have a development that we need to pay a little attention to. The Russian warship is entering the eastern Mediterranean, and I think that you mentioned this earlier. It's the frigate Admiral Grigorovich, and it's crossed the Bosphorus Strait a few hours ago from the Black Sea, headed to where those 2 U.S. military destroyers were that did the actual missile launch. Mike, what do you think Putin's got in mind for those ships?
Well, first of all, I heard that the frigate has actually docked in Syria. It's not confronting the ships.
Ah, okay.
But it does have defensive capability.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, of course, the 2 ships, the Porter and the Ross, they've used up roughly half of their current cruise missiles, assuming their missile loadout is all Tomahawk. And I would say, in all probability, half the loadout was Tomahawks and the other half are standards for defense. So at the moment, those ships do not carry a tremendous amount of firepower. I'm sure the U.S. is already moving other ships in there.
Yeah.
But the Grigorovich is armed with these Caliber cruise missiles, which have an anti-ship capability. And in theory, are much more accurate in terms of hitting their targets than the U.S. Tomahawks demonstrated last night.
Ouch. That's not good. You know, it's just going to take one little miscalculation, one stupid move, and we're going to wind up being at war with Russia. And to any English-speaking Russians who pick up on the website or the radio show, no thinking American, I know, wants to go to war with either Russia or China.
We don't want to go to war with anybody.
Yeah, you know.
Ordinary people do not want to go to war, and that is why throughout history, every war is started by a government that plays a dirty trick on their own people. The Gleiwitz incident, the Reichstag fire, the torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. That's how these things get started. And this Assad gassing his own people is just more of the same. It's business as usual. It's not shocking. It is not a scandal. It is how these things are always done, and you need to learn that, and more importantly, you need to teach it to your children because they're the ones who are going to be drafted as the bullet stoppers if this thing gets out of control.
Do you see if there is an escalation militarily, Trump bringing back the draft?
If there's an escalation and we get into a ground war, because right now our current boots on the ground are on the ground all over the world, something like 700 different bases.
Way too stretched, right?
We're way too stretched. Yeah. And we know that the draft legislation's been sitting in committee for years, just waiting for a political climate where they can vote it through and not expect a tremendous backlash from the American people. But again, the propaganda and psychology that allowed this to happen in World War I and World War II doesn't exist any longer. And I think if they brought back the draft, we would see rioting in the streets of America.
I think you're right. And that very unnerving statement by Ambassador Haley says the U.S. is prepared to do more in Syria following Thursday's airstrikes. And she was quoted as saying the United States took a very measured step last night. How in the name of heaven do you call bombing an airfield of a sovereign country with which you are not at war and toward which you have not declared war measured? I do not understand that, Mike, one single bit.
Well, the concerning part is saying, that The U.S. is prepared to do more, but hope that will not be necessary, basically setting the stage to renew the demand for Assad to step down and allow a U.S.-approved puppet junta to take over Syria, its economy, and its oil, and its pipeline rights of way.
Yeah. And Haley again went on to accuse Assad's regime of being behind Tuesday's gas attack in northern Syria, and saying this fully justified her government's decision to strike the airbase. That's absolutely a lie.
Of course it's a lie. The story doesn't make sense.
No.
Assad is winning the war against the U.S.-backed rebels.
Yeah.
Okay. He's feeling safe and secure for the first time in years.
Mm-hmm.
Trump had said Assad could stay on as president if he wins the next election, and they're having peace talks about the Syrian situation up in Brussels. This gas attack did absolutely nothing for Assad's benefit.
Yeah.
It very clearly benefited the rebels, the war hawks, the military-industrial complex, the bankers. The story just never made sense. And for Nikki Haley to stand up there at the United Nations and continue to repeat this lie, and I wish the decorum of the United Nations allowed Russia to stand up and say, you're full of it.
Yeah.
You are full of crap on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Russian deputy UN envoy said that the U.S. is afraid of a real investigation into the Syria chemical incident.
Well, that's why they rushed this attack.
Yeah.
You know, get it over and done with before anybody can come on back and say this is a repeat of 2013 and 2014, where the U.S. was saying, this is Iraq WMDs all over again.
Iraq 3.0.
Iraq 3.0. And again, for everybody listening to the show, do you realize the very low opinion of your intelligence being shown by this government that they actually thought this hoax had a chance of convincing any of you?
That it was going to work. That they, maybe to some Common Core graduates, but most of us who can think and think critically understand that there are more holes than a piece of Swiss cheese in this story.
Yeah.
And we also had a wonderful quote from Ken Livingstone, the British gentleman who was, I believe, the former mayor of London?
Yes, okay.
He said, I never rush to accept anything the United States said.
Very good. I agree. And therein lies the problem.
Yeah.
Because in the geopolitical sense, this strike on the Syrian airbase has sent the wrong message to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
It is not projecting an image of firm power and authority.
No.
It's projecting an image of extreme recklessness and a rogue nation willing to make up fairy tales and strike at random countries on the basis of those fairy tales.
Yeah.
And any nations that have nuclear weapons right now are going to be much more determined to hang on to them.
Mm-hmm.
And those nations who do not have nuclear weapons are going to be working that much harder to acquire them as a deterrent to an impending, inevitable U.S. invasion.
Yeah, the mad dog frothing at the mouth countenance does not work when it comes to international diplomacy.
Well, yeah, it does, in that the rest of the world is now seeing the United States as a mad dog.
Yes, frothing at the mouth. And
there's only one way to get rid of a mad dog, and therein lies the danger.
Yes. In a statement this morning, Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev said that the U.S. missile strike violated not only international law, and added that the attack was on the brink of military clashes with Russia. And what scares me so much is if this starts, I don't think it's going to stop, Michael. I think that we're going to be in for a down-and-out war with Russia that's going to involve the entire world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing that concerns me now, it's obvious that the war hawks have hit the gas pedal. Because they are aware that the American public aren't believing the lies.
Yeah.
Their resistance to war is growing. And all they can think of doing is trying to rush this thing through as fast as possible. That's what they just did in Syria. Tell the lie, drop the bombs before anybody can react. Are they going to do the same thing to North Korea? Are they going to set off a nuclear bomb someplace around here and say, oh my goodness, North Korea tried to attack us, but thankfully their defective missiles landed in the ocean? But there's a nice picture of a mushroom cloud for the tourists to take.
And speaking of World War III, Kim Jong-un has declared yesterday that he is on the brink of war with the U.S., as Donald Trump is urged to do a decap strike against him. It warned that it is ready to deliver the most ruthless blow as major naval exercises, ramp up the tensions in the region. And apparently in his conversation with Xi Jinping in Florida, Trump pledged to ramp up defenses against Pyongyang. Now, by the way, do you notice kind of a deafening silence, Mike, about what actually was discussed during that meeting?
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact. Well, of course, obviously, the strike in Syria has taken a lot of things off the front page, like Obamagate and Russiagate and so forth and so on. Anyway, listen, we're coming up here on a commercial break. We've got to take a break for a few words from our sponsors, and we'll be right back after these messages. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. A little bit of breaking news here. Apparently, Bashar al-Assad sent those tornadoes to Washington, D.C. to rip up the cherry trees.
Really?
Yes. So
oh, my goodness.
More airstrikes, according to Nikki Haley. And, you know, Bashar al-Assad has his own Death Star now.
Yeah.
All right. So getting on back to the more serious things.
I have not really heard anything about any agreements that President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have reached over these 2 days of talks. Have you seen anything about it?
I've not seen anything about it.
Yeah.
Supposedly they're talking about security. They're talking about North Korea. I'm sure that Donald Trump is trying to get China to put pressure on North Korea to disarm its nukes. Unfortunately, Donald Trump just made that almost impossible with this clearly unprovoked, fraudulently created strike against Syria. Any world leader who gives up their nuclear deterrent now is being an idiot. And I'm sure that Xi Jinping is saying, yeah, you kind of killed your own agenda with that stupid move.
Yeah.
I know that they were supposed to talk about a lot of economic issues as well, and some of them probably related to having the Chinese economy conform to America's needs a little bit more, and I don't think Xi Jinping is going to go along with that either, because China's having their own economic hardships.
Right.
And that in turn was brought about by the fact that for so many years, China is a manufacturing powerhouse and an exporting country, and most of their exports came to the United States of America. But now the American people, who have been impoverished by the money junkies in Wall Street, can't go to the big box stores and buy these Chinese-made goods. And China had actually been dependent on the American import market, and so their economy is now jamming on up.
Yeah, it's difficult for them right now. And I have seen a lot of articles in some places that I generally trust to go for real news. And there is this whole hue and cry of, oh, it's the online stores that are absolutely killing retail. No, people just don't flat have the money.
No, they really don't.
You know.
And there are a lot of online retail operations that are starting to go out of business as well. And as I keep telling you, retail is very much rooted in instant gratification. I go buy things online only when I can't find them in the local stores, because I want to go into the store, I want to pick it up, hold it, take a look at how it's built, if it's going to last at all, and then I give them my money, they give me the product, and we both go home happy. And that's how that works. The reality is that there isn't enough currency in the regular part of our economy, the working and middle class. Everybody's just barely getting by. They're living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
And so, of course, retail is going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
And they're all looking for scapegoats because nobody has the courage to stand up and say that our economy is in a mess for two reasons. Wall Street corruption, and we've been living effectively in a wartime economy for, what, 16 years now. 16 years we've been in a wartime economy, and we're showing the strain of it. So, now, for the rest of the show, and we are going to open up the phone lines at this point, we have to deal with a very unpleasant reality. And that is, there is a very realistic possibility that the United States is going to get into a real world war involving Russia, possibly China, and we all need to be ready to deal with that. And that involves even if you're not on the natural invasion routes, and even if you're living far away from the first strike nuclear targets, which I wish we did, the fact is war impacts everybody negatively, and there are certain common sense preparations you should be thinking about. Remember, prepping is a lifestyle. It's not just buying a bunch of stuff. putting it in the closet. Remember after Hurricane Sandy, the running joke, how could you tell the preppers? They were the ones not eating out of the trash dumpsters.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and you have to start thinking about that. And that means just like you would if you're preparing for a hurricane or anything else, but you've got to deal with that reality that it looks like the war party, the war agenda is going to get us into a real conflict with Russia and possibly China, possibly even nuclear. It's going to affect everybody. The time to start making preparations to keep yourself and your loved ones safe is right this very second.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a break for commercials. When we come on back, we're just going to be sharing some comments and stuff. The phone lines are open. Call on in. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we have a caller waiting on the line, Nick in Southern California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike and Claire. Glad to have the pleasure of calling in during clarification. I wanted to talk about how I'm handling these conversations with talking to people about Syria. You know, a lot of the people who voted for Trump are supporting this because you just have people who, you know, don't have enough information. And I think that, you know, my tactic is to have a discussion understanding that there is a possibility that, you know, the official story is true. However, that we have to consider all possibilities and understand that there is another story out there. And
at this point, I'm sorry, the official story isn't true. It makes no sense at all. Remember what I said. If you want to find out if you're being lied to, look for what should be there and isn't. And in this case, what should be there for the story to be true and isn't is a reason for Assad to have done such a stupid thing at a time when it's going to do nothing but hurt him and help the rebels and the U.S. and all the rest of it. He was winning the war. Hang on. He was winning the war in Syria. There were peace talks going up in Brussels.
Yeah.
Trump had said that Assad could stay on. Why would Assad pick that moment to use chemical weapons? And if he was stupid enough to use chemical weapons, why didn't he target the rebels instead of civilians?
See, Nick, this makes absolutely zero sense for al-Assad to have done this at this time because the tide was turning in his favor. Tillerson just a few days ago said, well, al-Assad is not really our focus right now. We're looking at getting rid of ISIS, yada, yada, yada. So there is no logical reason for al-Assad to have done this.
You guys.
Okay. All right.
I'm not arguing any of that. I agree with you guys.
Well, that's the main argument. That's the main argument point right there. Plus, remind everybody about how the U.S. government lied about Saddam's nukes and how they lied about Assad gassing his own people in 2013 and 2014. This is just more of the same. Anyway, we're going to drop you. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch to Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. You know, nobody seems to be mentioning that Syria doesn't have any gas. They lost it all under the Russian brokered peace deal that prevent us from
2013.
Syria.
Yeah. And both the Pentagon and the United Nations inspectors verified all the weapons were surrendered and destroyed. Of course, Israel's now out there screaming that Assad is making sarin gas in his bedroom or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, they're just piling more lies on, and every time you point out the flaw in the lie, they come out with another lie. And that's right. That's just what they do.
Terry, that's a very good point, and thank you for making it.
Thank you, Claire. Talk to you later.
All right, thanks. We're going to switch to Chris in Portland, Oregon. Aloha, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. My name is Chris. I'm calling from Portland. I just want to thank you for everything you've done. I've been listening since 2011. And I just want to say that by attacking Assad, is Trump supporting the FSA, ISIS, and now Nusra Front? I mean, is this not what we would have got with Clinton?
Yeah, unfortunately it is, and it's basically sending a message to the American people that the president really is just a figurehead, and obviously the intelligence agencies, the war party, whatever it took to get Trump under their control, they succeeded. Whether they showed him the Zapruder film from Dealey Plaza and said, look, we got away with killing a president before, so you better shape up. But certainly, I mean, look at the turnaround in the corporate media that was demonizing him all during the campaign, and all these other people. Now they're praising him to heaven. CNN thinks he's great. MSNBC thinks he's great. Schumer and Pelosi and all these people are out there cheering for their President Donald Trump. Now that he's being a good little boy and going on with the existing war agenda, he's everybody's friend again. Like I said, this all happened too quickly for this to genuinely be Donald Trump's own policy decision. He got corralled and he got controlled, and the exact mechanism actually isn't irrelevant any longer because we're now dealing with a renewed threat of a global war, potentially nuclear, which I think we cannot ultimately win.
And the other thing...
Well, I agree with you on that.
The other thing...
I'm sorry, Claire.
Well, that's okay. The other thing that just galls me in looking at this process, and I mean, I turn 68 next month, so I've seen a lot of elections.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank
Happy
you,
birthday to
I've
you.
seen a lot of elections in my time, but what I am seeing right now is that American voters have only a choice between one deep state approved candidate or the other deep state approved candidate.
Well,
and
Trump,
that's not really a choice.
That's not accurate. Trump was definitely not approved by the deep state, but he's definitely been compromised by them.
He's been co-opted, yeah.
And, you know, this probably has a lot to do with all of that spying that was going on Trump, because remember, after he won the election, they were spying on him before, but after he won the election, the spying increased. So they were clearly, you know, trying to find ways to get rid of anybody on Trump's inner circle that wasn't going to go along with it. And yes, they basically piled onto him and they've co-opted his presidency.
Yeah.
They've hijacked it. And that's just a reality. Trump has succeeded in making himself pretty much irrelevant to the future course of this nation. He's made himself a single-term president.
Yep.
And we are now seriously at risk of this situation spiraling completely out of control. To the threat to all of us, you know, from a world war, potentially nuclear. And my concern is the United States is going to lose it. And look what happened to Germany after they lost World War II. That is going to happen here.
Yeah, that's a very scary thought. I wanted to say to Claire, you know, I know she's a Christian and she goes to church, and I know that you don't believe in the Christian Orthodox or anything like that, Mike, but I just had a question for Claire. Is being a Christian, what are your thoughts about, you know, the battle between Gog and Magog? I mean, to me, it seems like, you know, it's getting crazy. It's like it's Russia and it's Putin and Trump.
Well,
are they playing Syria together? Are they playing it together?
Let me share my thoughts. As you may know, I'm a musician in the other part of my life. I'm a published composer, and Thursday night is my night to yell at Methodists. I conduct a small church choir. What I said to them in my invocational prayer was, we've got a lot of stuff going on. We need to be kinder in our own circle. I have never seen evil come about that did not come about through human action. And people can be evil, people can be good. I think we have to demand of ourselves to be better human beings, and that our response to the evil that we are seeing has to be kindness, goodness, and compassion, because that's the best any of us can do.
See, the problem is we're always going to see evil in the world because evil people are willing to do things good people are not.
Yeah.
And that unfortunately gives them a bit of an advantage. And we're in a situation right now where our government has become so corrupted, it allows very evil, sociopathic people paths to great power and great wealth. And they have no compunction about using it for their own personal glorification, enrichment, and they really do seem to evince an attitude of being truly an elite, a separate species. And they see the rest of everybody around as just pieces of their game. Like Kissinger, when he described military people as dumb, stupid pawns to be spent on geopolitical aims. When Madeleine Albright was asked about the 1 million Iraqi children who starved to death during the sanctions, and she said, well, that was a reasonable price to pay. And that's really how they think about us. And it's a sad state of affairs for the human condition, but it's what we're stuck with here.
And I think that it's important that people move forward as peacefully as they can to share the truth with other people, and don't go too far too fast. Give them a little factoid, let them work on that. Give them another little factoid, let them work on that. Because seeing the magnitude of what's been going on in this government has been really funny for a Christian to say, but it's been a Buddha on the road moment for me.
Yeah,
you know.
it has.
Yeah.
And when you're talking to people, and right now, the most important thing any of you listening to this show can do is to speak out. But just keep it simple. Have a few points. Just point out how we were lied to about Saddam's nukes. We were lied to about Assad gassing his people in 2013. We were lied again about Assad gassing his own people in 2014. And this is just more of the same. And just point out how the story just does not make any sense at all. And just keep it simple. Don't give them a lot of fine details. And again, go gently. Don't trigger their defensive mechanism. But right now, people really are waking up. And they're out there receptive to hearing what's going on. Now, you're always going to run into people who are either undercover FBI informants, or they're simply unwilling to face reality, and they're going to want to argue back. Don't waste your time with them. Don't waste your time arguing with people whose only goal is to argue with you. Just keep your antenna open for those people who are asking questions and really want honest answers, and be there for them with those answers. You're never going to push somebody across a bridge. You have to stand on the other side and beckon them over. And you will find that most people are ready to make that trip. Okay?
God bless you all. And I feel like those Obama supporters in 2008, about a year later, but it's only been about 3 months later.
I hear you.
It is what it is. I'm gonna keep listening, and thank you, Claire, and thank you, Mike, and I'll keep listening. Take care. Bye.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch over to Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, one of the narratives that I seem to be hearing going out today in order to, I guess, to deflect criticism of Trump's decision is that this is a highly, intelligent Machiavellian move. Primarily, it might have a number of purposes, but the primary purpose for which was to impress leadership of China. And these are supposedly pretty intelligent, highly listened to individuals that are putting this out. And I'm thinking that presumes that the Chinese leadership get their news from the mainstream U.S. media and actually believe the narrative that comes out of that. To me, that seems silly.
Yeah, I would agree. Every nation, state, government, they have their own intelligence services finding out what's really going on, because they realize the media of every other nation is a propaganda ministry, and they're not going to pay attention other than to find out what's being lied about today. Now, the Chinese are very intelligent. There's also a big issue about face that if you don't appreciate that, you're going to get into trouble with the negotiations. But again, it all comes down to just what image of the U.S. government has been sent out to the rest of the world as of last night. Now, if there had been some kind of a real attack against the United States and Trump responded to it decisively, that would be a good message. We will not be attacked. We will respond decisively. We're not afraid to use our military might to protect our people and our country. But that's not the message that went on out.
Nope.
The message that went on out is the government of the United States of America has just become this reckless aggressor who will make up blatant lies about other countries as a pretext for wars of conquest and invasion. And that, of course, is going to just create this incredible hostility against the United States from all around the globe. And as I said, this is going to make it much more difficult to get nations that already have nuclear weapons, like North Korea, to surrender them. And certainly, I think every nation that does not have nuclear weapons right now are seriously discussing ways that they can acquire them.
Yeah.
Possibly buy them under the table from Israel, the way South Africa tried to do. Okay?
He dropped.
Okay, all right. Let's go to Paul in Nebraska. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Hello, Mike.
Hi.
I'm kind of like the other caller before, listening to a lot of things, and it's kind of like President Trump's art of the deal, because he's got everybody sitting down at the table real nice at his camp there, when he's proving that he can blow up something somewhere else. I think he's putting China and North Korea on notice.
That's a dangerous thing to do.
I don't think he actually. I think it's dangerous, but I don't think he actually blew anything up over there, other than the gases and stuff that should have been done with Obama a year ago.
There were no chemical weapons at that air base. The only people who've got chemical weapons in Syria are the U.S.-backed rebels. In fact, Syria approached some of these monitoring organizations only a few weeks ago saying that the rebels were bringing in new chemical weapons from Turkey, and nothing was done about it. So, that's the situation there. And again, Assad surrendered all of his chemical weapons. He said he really didn't want to use them anyway. The Pentagon and the United Nations inspectors verified that he did surrender all of those chemical weapons. And again, the idea that when he's already winning the war and he's in the middle of peace talks in Brussels and the White House is saying he can stay on as president, there's no reason for him to use a chemical weapon. And if he had used a chemical weapon, why target civilians instead of the rebels themselves? This chemical weapon attack on civilians is designed to provoke the maximum shock and horror in the hope that you'll be so emotional about it you won't think carefully about what has just been put before your eyes.
I think also.
No, I agree.
I think also it's a case of there is a Latin phrase, cui bono, who benefits. Sure as heck wasn't al-Assad, wasn't his government, wasn't his plans for fighting the rebels. This just, I think the words lead balloon.
Well, this was absolutely the worst thing that could happen for Assad at this particular time, and that's why we know he didn't do it, because he's not a stupid man.
No.
And again, it benefits the rebels, it benefits the U.S. warhawks, it benefits the military-industrial complex and the bankers. Paul, we're going to let you go. We're running out of time, and I'm going to try and get the rest of these calls. Jesse in Nashville, I may have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hey, buddy, I'm one of your silent listeners. I've never called in. I've been listening to you for the better part of the decade. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to call and thank you for everything you've done for me and all the other people that listen to you.
Well, thank you very much.
You've just been an amazing man, and you've changed my life. You've changed the way I see the world, the way I view reality. I listen to a lot of different talk show hosts, but you're my favorite. Always has been. I know from my experience and from all I've studied that you are the truth. You speak the truth, and you are a upstanding
real quick. What part of Nebraska are you in?
Oh, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee.
I'm sorry. I misread the thing. I'm sorry. That was the last caller. All right. Well, thank you very much. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha. Welcome back to the last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. We're going to take 2 more phone calls, and that should be the rest of the show for us. We're going to go to Diva in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Great. Aloha. Claire and Michael. This is Diva.
I know.
And I'm mad as hell.
I hear you, my dear.
And I'm not taking it anymore.
Okay. I hear you.
I'm just not taking it anymore.
Yeah.
Remember you said, fool me once, fool me twice?
Yeah.
How many times does it take for Trump to get fooled?
I hear you. And I'm telling all of my peace advocate friends, get the word out there as logically as you can, as intelligently as you can, that what has happened has put us on the precipice of war with Russia. And again, to any Russians or Chinese out there who speak good English and are listening, thinking people like Mike and me do not want war. We want peace, we want prosperity, and please to be left alone. Thank you very much. That's all we want.
Very, very, very much so. And again, we all need to be speaking out right now, if for no other reason than to let the people of other nations understand that we, the American people, are not believing these lies about Assad gassing his own people or Saddam having nuclear weapons or Putin has a Death Star or any of this other nonsense they're trying to feed us, and to let the people of other nations know we, the American people, do not support these wars of conquest. We're trying to oppose them peacefully any way that we can. But it's important for people to speak out now. More than at any other time since I began doing this back in 1994, I'm asking everybody to make a point of talking to your friends, your family, your coworkers, social media, email, and just get the word on out and understand that social media is now being filtered. So you may try things like deliberately misspelling certain things so the filters don't catch it. But we're decisively engaged, and at stake is the future not just of the United States of America, but of the world itself. So, Diva, thank you for the phone call. We've got time for one more call only. Alex in Florida, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I hate being like this, but I want to tell you that I hate Trump and his family now.
Well, I agree. I agree with Trump. I agree with Trump. I don't extend it to the family. The family is off limits. You know, especially Barron. He's a good kid, and we don't have any reason to have any animosity towards him. Okay, but Trump, at this point.
I understand that, but he's inconsiderate of other people's kids. Trump is inconsiderate of other people's kids, and maybe there's an old saying: you don't know what war is until bombs are being dropped on you.
No, I understand that, and again, and I'm not trying to defend what Donald Trump did because I'm absolutely horrified by it, but I think this is a systemic crime and not that of Donald Trump himself. The rapidity with which he went from saying Assad can stay on to bombing Syria tells me that somebody's got a leash on Donald Trump and they yanked it good and hard, and that's we need to keep that in mind, that the establishment, the deep state, are even able to control and constrain a president. So we just.
I want to say one thing. I just want to say one thing.
We're out of time,
Mr. Trump.
Go ahead.
I just want to say, Mr. Trump, if you're listening, you and your family will be hated forever if you do this.
Okay, the family is off limits. The family is off limits. Okay, that's the rules around here. The family is off limits. All right, thank you for the phone call. There's the music. Have a really good weekend. We'll be back Monday on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Aloha, America.